Endocrine disrupting chemicals, or EDC. This is today's topic. These are elements that are found in our household products, in our water supply, in items that we use on a daily basis. Now, they can wreak havoc on our endocrine system and they really can disrupt our hormones. Now, can you really avoid those in your daily life? And what can you do? What practical steps can you take to minimize your exposure to those materials? This is what we're discussing today. Hello everyone and welcome to the Wealth of Health podcast. My name is Ahmed. I'm the CEO of Echelon Health, and with me as always is Dr. Paul Jenkins, Medical Director, Consultant Physician and Endocrinologist.
Hello and welcome.
Now, today's topic is it's a big deal.
Yep.
So we're talking about EDCs, or endocrine disrupting chemical. I don't know, endocrine disrupting chemical seems to be a very benign term, like they're just disrupting, but in actual fact, they are a lot more damaging to the entire body, aren't they?
I think it's a major issue, and one that people are starting to become a little bit more aware of, but if people are more aware of it, will have a major concern about it. I mean,
Right.
they are EDCs, they're chemicals or mixture of chemicals that can interfere with any aspect of hormone function. Yep.
Okay.
The US Endocrine Society, which is one of our premier society worldwide, reckons there's over 1,000 chemicals that fall into that category.
1,000.
1,000. And we're exposed to these now all the time in everything that we do.
Okay, that sounds scary and sounds like one of those things I'm like, oh my God, another thing that's going to eventually kill me and I have to avoid it. But 1,000 chemicals that can disrupt our hormones, and we'll get on to why this is a big problem when
Yep.
our hormones are disrupted. But they must be available, in everything?
Many aspects of it. Yes. Now, this is relatively new. Yep.
Okay.
So the first thing was only about 50 years ago. There was a very famous book that started it, The Silent Spring, which talked about the effects of a pesticide on the human development.
Right.
And then, it's interesting, I find this lovely bit of work, a researcher, about 1990s, he was at David Feldman, he was studying yeast, yeah?
Okay.
Production of yeast,
Yeah.
and did they produce estrogen? Yes? So he cultured them in plastic bottles, flasks, yes? And then he measured the production of estrogen activity in the fluid, yes? And as a control, he used fluid kept in a flask that had no yeast in it.
Right.
Because you've always need a negative control. But lo and behold, he was concerned that the negative control had significant estrogen activity.
Right.
Where's this coming? This is just culture media from a plastic. Yes. And then they slowly worked out by careful deduction that it was from the plastic itself.
From the plastic.
Was releasing estrogen activity. And even worse was that whenever they sterilized that plastic flask so they could reuse them and keep them sterile, the estrogen activity increased.
Because
the heat was denaturing some of the plastics and causing the estrogen activity.
Okay, so
and it's really since then that this is now recognized as one of the leading environmental sort of risks globally. Is these estrogen endocrine disrupting chemicals, EDCs.
Okay, so let's go back to the main theme. 1,000 chemicals. One of them they were discovered almost by mistake.
Yes, but that's plastics. But now plastics, clearly we live in a world which is dominated by plastic.
Right.
Plastic is everywhere. So it's part of some of the polycarbonated plastics that are used in them. It's part of the plasticizers that are the chemicals used to form plastics.
Right.
So those are, everything we do. How many times, if you think of it, do you touch plastic? Do you eat from plastic? Do you heat food in plastic?
Yeah.
Okay,
so it's first of all, it's in all plastics. Safe to say that?
Well, many plastics.
Right.
Yes.
It's also in our water supply. Why would it be in our water supply?
Because it's Other EDCs are from a number of pesticides,
Okay.
herbicides.
Yes.
So atrazine is a
Yes.
chemical substance, one of the most commonly used herbicides worldwide.
Mm.
And that's a potent EDC.
Right.
So then that gets washed off and you get into the runoff of the water, contaminates the water supply. Yeah?
Okay.
And we are reusing our water, trying to purify it from all of the nasty substances, but you're not screening it out for these EDCs.
Okay.
They're still present.
So it's in plastics, it's in water, it's in
in the-
cosmetics as well?
And a number of cosmetics contain them. Sunscreen contains them.
Sunscreen.
Yep. So
Okay.
those are other EDCs. We get some of it from the air, exposed to the air, vaporized, burning of a number of chemicals, plastics releases EDCs into the atmosphere. So we absorb it through air, through water, through diet. So
Okay.
it's a pretty potent. I think one key factor of these is that many of these so-called EDCs are, the scientific terms are, is lipophilic. They're fat soluble.
Right.
Yes, so they are slowly accumulated within our body in our body's own fat stores, and therefore they have a very, very long half-life. So you
Okay.
can't get rid of them
So
easily.
you can't get rid of them.
No,
You can't flush them out.
you cannot flush them out. No.
They're
So-
stored in the body's fat cells.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fat stores.
So we say they're hormone disruptors. What does that? So we know these are about 1,000 bad,
Yes.
items or elements all around us, and they are hormone disruptors. What does that mean?
Well, they can influence all aspects of hormone function. So they can mimic an actual hormone, or they can interfere with the production of the hormone, the synthesis of that hormone. They can interfere with its breakdown of the hormone. It can interfere with the binding of that hormone onto its receptor. And that's how a hormone mediates its effect. It binds to a receptor, and then you get all of the cell signaling downstream. So they can interfere with every aspect of how a hormone could function.
So what?
Well, because our hormones, I mean, I'm not just biased to my own speciality, but they're some of the most powerful factors that control how every action that we feel in the normal, we call it the homeostasis of the body. That's how it maintains our body in the.
So what's an example of how that disruption can?
So they can, I mean, the three hormonal sort of axes, the targets the EDCs influence. One is the estrogen.
Right.
The estrogen and testosterone production and function. One is the thyroid. One is the thyroid gland and the functions of the thyroid hormones. One is the adrenal gland. And then they can have what we call obesogenic. They stimulate obesity.
Wow. Okay.
So, now, my personal thing I just want to take as an example is the thyroid. Yes, I see a lot of patients with an underactive thyroid. Yes, I have seen in my career a big change in the presentation of thyroid disease. And I've been thinking, why is this the case? So our thyroid gland here makes a main hormone called thyroxine.
Right.
In the lab, it's called T4.
Right.
Yes, that itself is converted to a more active hormone called T3.
Yes.
And that's the T3 mediates most of the effects of thyroxine. Traditionally, we just measured thyroxine T4. Yes. Increasingly, I am seeing patients who don't convert T4 to T3.
Don't.
No. So they have normal levels of T4, but low normal levels of T3.
The receptors.
And they have symptoms of an underactive thyroid.
Right.
This is a big change. I mean, I see this much, much more commonly than I used to.
Would you correlate this to a disruption in the receptors or the
Well,
ability
there
to
are the
convert?
conversion, the
Yeah.
ability to convert T4 to T3. And we now know that some EDCs block that conversion. And some of those common, the pesticides, the organic pesticides, are known to block that conversion. Because you've got to think there is a disease that's happening, yes, or there is something is happening that patients now have much lower levels of T3 than they used to.
Yes.
You've got to think, why is that? So the first is a fact. I can tell you it's a fact. There is low levels of T3. Why should this be the case? EDCs are a prime candidate for that.
And you mentioned something about estrogen.
Yes.
So isn't estrogen a natural hormone?
Yes, estrogen is the hormone produced by the ovaries.
Yes.
It is also produced by some conversion of testosterone to estrogen.
Yes.
But these EDCs can mimic the effects of estrogen.
Mimic the effects. Okay.
Yes. So
Even in men.
and
I mean,
very much so in men. Yes.
okay.
And so this is one of the effects of these EDCs is the decline in sperm count, you know,
Uh,
and is the decline in fertility. Yes. In women, you get decline in fertility as well.
right.
So these are very, very real issues. You get changes in the male genitalia associated with them. And the effects of these are much more pronounced, and we are much more sensitive to all of this in utero, so during pregnancy.
So the fetus
Yeah. So
is susceptible to
yes,
being impacted
it's
by that.
much more susceptible. It's the most sensitive time in the development
Hmm.
is that of the fetus. So women that are exposed to these EDCs can have effects on the fetus that may then not become apparent for years, decades later.
Right.
That's the concern even more about EDCs. Are we only now starting to see the effects of them?
What are some of those effects, especially when it comes to the estrogen on the male and female bodies due to exposure of EDCs?
Well, it's a reducing in the sperm count, fertility.
That's for men. And in women?
Well, you get an increased risk of breast cancer, uterine cancer.
Wow. Okay.
Because of this. So they have major effects.
So here's something I read, and I thought it was an urban legend or a myth. Did you know the story about the male frog who drank tap water and then turned into a female frog?
I had heard.
So that's the urban legend.
Yes.
But actually, there is a scientific
Yes.
study that was done on a number of thousands of frogs. I think I have the details here. And obviously, it wasn't tap water, but it was atrazine.
Okay. So this is a chemical I mentioned, the herbicide.
Water, but very high contents of atrazine, and the male frog actually turned into a female frog after elongated exposure to the. So
I would sum up that's exactly what an EDC
I would have thought
does.
this is science fiction, and
Yes.
absolutely, there's no way this is real.
Yes.
But it's 100% real. You can Google the details of their search
Yes.
are online,
Yeah.
and it's a surprise that no one said, okay, hold on. How can we let this go on like this? So, do you know if there's been any steps by government or regulatory bodies to reduce the amount of these elements in our plastics, or can you not avoid them?
Well, no, there have been some steps, but it's because they're in very low concentrations. Yes, because the effects can be decades afterwards.
Right.
Yes, and it's because it's very hard to do classical, what's called toxicology studies.
Right.
So you expose somebody to a noxious substance, and then you study the effects objectively with data.
Okay.
So for all of those reasons, it's much less clear. Yes, they have absolutely banned some substances, some of the bad pesticides, but then as soon as they ban one, new ones are developed, and then we see that they too can have EDC effects. So it's and there is a lot of vested interest clearly with the pharmaceutical, the manufacturers to not to suppress some of the adverse effects or findings.
Especially if one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world own one of the biggest pesticide manufacturing companies in the world, which is the case. I will never get my head around that.
There's one I was looking up earlier.
Yeah.
There's one of the so-called plasticizers, bisphenol A. Yes. Right. So that's one of the early big EDCs, and that's what this plastics I said about the yeast experiment.
Yes.
He had found. Yes. So that's been banned now, but only for baby bottles. So bottles used for baby milk.
Right.
It's not banned for use in adults.
It's almost thought that it was in baby milk bottles, but okay.
So that's a classic one where there's been some attempt to it, but for the reasons I've said, they've said no. The evidence for adults is not sufficient. Now this one is not lipophilic, so it's not fat soluble.
Right.
So the regulators, the authorities said no because you'll excrete it every day.
Okay.
But the trouble is, you're exposed to it every single day.
So
plastic.
That's the other thing. So if they say in the water analysis there are traces of this, or this is lower than the
Yeah.
minimum required or minimum standard, so it's safe. It's safe in a single dose.
Yeah.
But is it safe if I keep drinking the same thing
Yeah.
or eating the same thing for the next 30 years?
Yeah.
Especially if something basically essential as water.
Yes, I would agree with you.
So
I think you can't say that, and those studies, can't be done, or it's very difficult to do the studies. But we do know the powerful effect of these EDCs, and ideally, I would not want to be drinking anything that could be, interfering with my the production function of my hormones in an adverse way.
okay, but in a way, it's available everywhere.
Yes.
Okay, it's also in cookware, I heard.
Yes.
So the non-stick.
The non-stick Teflon.
Yeah,
Yep.
Teflon. So all of that is, has some of those elements.
Yes.
It's in perfumes as well.
Yes.
It's in plastics. It's in food containers. So for me, this
flame retardants. A lot of flame retardants for furniture has some powerful EDCs in it, fluorinated.
So if I live in England, I shouldn't buy a waterproof jacket. I should just get soaked every time I go out. So, but that's what I mean. They are in practical day-to-day.
We are ubiquitously exposed to it. Yes.
Right. So is there a way of avoiding them, or at least reducing our exposure?
Well, I think it's having a better awareness of them. Yeah, trying to avoid as much as you can the contamination with them, and the practical steps of that is to avoid plastic.
Yes. Avoid plastic.
Avoid plastic as much as you can. You should not be trying to avoid drinking from plastic bottles.
Yes, 100%.
Should certainly avoid microwaving in plastic,
because that increases
heating. This first study of the autoclaving and allowing the estrogen to be released from the plastic.
Right.
So you should use glass. Which is what more and more people are doing now, which is good as part of, pro recycling.
Yes.
Is refillable glass bottles, yes. is using glass containers.
But microwave dinners are the absolute worst.
Well, I would say, trying to avoid that as much as possible.
So even plastic that is advertised as microwave safe, that means it's safe as in it's not going to melt.
Correct.
But microwave safe doesn't mean it's not going to release
EDCs.
Or dump more of those chemicals into the food that we consume.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And again, it's being aware of your food, the food source. Because if it's been covered with herbicides, pesticides, which are all, potent EDCs.
Right.
So some of them are still going to be incorporated in the food.
So the number one and the biggest thing is plastics, but every single item I buy from the supermarket is in a plastic container.
Yeah.
It's in a plastic wrap.
It is. I agree with that. Yeah, but I mean, there's been moves towards going back to paper.
Yes.
Yes, which is a good thing.
Because in the old days, you got your groceries in a big brown paper bag or in a basket, which was, organic almost.
Yes, I agree. So again, food production is responsible, and the way we buy our food is contributing to this.
Okay.
Yes.
What else, or how else can I avoid my exposure or reduce it at least?
Well, I think those are really the main issues.
One of the ones I heard is cooking in stainless steel.
You can do that, yeah.
And
avoiding the non-stick.
Yeah, avoid the non-stick completely,
yes.
and do stainless steel pots and pans.
Yeah.
And
old-fashioned steel pan is.
Or cast iron.
Yes, cast iron.
Yeah, which is actually becoming more and more trendy these
days.
A lot of people do their steak in cast iron skillets, which is healthier.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? I mean, where can people read about this if they want to delve deeper?
Well, I think if you do the Endocrine Society does some good work on endocrine disrupting chemicals. If you look at it, typed in, you'll see that there is a vast amount of literature and concern about it. Quite what any government is going to do to regulate it or to try and restrict the incorporation into foodstuffs is going to be difficult.
Yes.
I mean, it's getting back into our whole, we should be recycling more and reducing the total amount of plastics.
Yes, but you will know how it works. You know, the governments will be lobbied and they will tell them, well,
Yes.
there's no empirical study that this
I think
directly correlates to disruption in endocrine. And you have your research, we have our research. And
your
it takes
cynicism is refreshingly accurate.
mine.
Yes,
Yeah, but
that's what's
it's
going to
based
happen.
on
Yeah,
reality and,
it is. I
and
agree.
previous experience.
I
This
agree.
can take years, if
It will
anything.
take years. Yes.
Side on a completely side note, but it relates to how these things are taken seriously by governments. Um, Texas is now trying to ban the ability of people to use their food stamps to buy full fat Cokes and cookies and things that are very disrupting, and also tin cans have a lot of EDCs
In the lining of the
in the
cans,
lining of
the
the
plastic
cans.
lining. Yes.
And yet the American Heart Foundation found it suitable to send their representative to try and block the bill that prevents people
Yeah.
from. So that tells you a lot about how these things work in practice. So I'm
Going to
not.
be a long battle.
It's
But
going
at
to be
least,
a
I mean,
very
I
long
think the
battle
point of
if it
this is
starts.
just to raise some awareness of it and to question it and take what steps.
What about water? Because
Yep.
there are certain percentages. So one of the things I did when we were researching this is I went to the website of my water supplier in Kent, and I actually found the results of the test of the water test. Interesting, because a lot of those endocrine disrupting chemicals form part as a result of the test.
Okay.
But they all say these are
Within
within
safe limits. Or
safe limits. Traces are found.
yes.
Very little percentage.
Yes.
Can these be cleared through the use of water filters?
Oh, no. No, not at all. No.
Wow.
The water filters are there for microbacteria,
Right.
you know. So for bacteria, for organisms that can cause disease. But
Yes.
they're not going to purify the actual chemical structures, tiny amounts of chemicals within the water.
So that's not even, you can even avoid them
No.
using the most advanced water filter.
No.
Okay. Well, that's.
So sorry, slightly.
I'm trying to find somewhere to go here where there's a positive note,
No.
but I'm struggling.
It is. It's a rather depressing concept, and the modern world and the food production that we have.
Okay, but at least there would be a workaround with many of these things, with many of the daily exposures, like we said with plastics
Yes.
and with cooking
Yeah.
and with cosmetics.
Yeah.
So at least there's a lot that could be done to reduce that daily exposure.
Yeah.
Right.
I think you have to be even more careful if you're, pregnant female. Yes.
Right.
Because of the effects in utero on the fetus, the baby, and the fact that the side effects of that won't be apparent, for years, decades afterwards.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
the-
Piece of trivia: atrazine was discovered in 1959, so almost 75 years ago. But over the last 50 years, on a completely unrelated matter, male sperm count has reduced by 62% from its original levels
okay.
50 years ago. They could be completely unrelated. But then again,
Not at
I'm
all.
finding no clinical or scientific evidence that
No.
supports a different reason for that decline
No.
at all.
No. But again, that's a hard fact. Yeah, that's an objective statement. The male sperm has decreased by 62%. What you have to then say is why. That could be EDCs are a very, very likely culprit
Yes.
for that. Taken together, not necessarily one specific one, but taken together. Absolutely.
Because we don't get necessarily exposed to one material, we get exposed to hundreds of them
Yes.
on daily basis.
Yeah.
Because of the variation of where they're available.
Yes. Exactly. And I say the cumulative effect of them, because they're fat soluble. So you coming back to, it's a tiny little dose in my glass of water, but if that's a lipophilic one, so it's just absorbed into your fat, then it gets concentrated in your fat more and more. So
what do you do in your daily life to avoid exposure to these things?
nowadays, it's only use glass.
All use glass.
As possible. Try and avoid drinking from plastic bottles, the instant bottles as much as possible. Microwave using glass, store food in glass.
Right.
And try and be as careful as I can over the source of it. So wherever possible, organic food.
I don't have a microwave. I gave up microwave about
Huh?
10 years ago
Okay.
because again, never trusted anything that
Yes.
heats my food in 10 seconds. It's just not right.
Yes. So I think those are some steps.
And in terms of clothes, any changes there? Because you said, it's available in all waterproof clothing.
I don't know of waterproof clothing, but of the waterproof, is it? Oh,
Yeah, from
okay.
what I read, like all the waterproof jackets,
Okay.
or the water repellent jackets,
Okay.
it's in the top form of wax that is used
Okay.
to
Then,
block it.
yes.
Do you think there will be companies in the future who make things, I wouldn't say ethically, because those companies didn't necessarily know the impact of what they're producing, but do you think there will be companies in the future that manufacture things that are, if they actually can call it that, like EDC free?
Well, I think part of this, and with this, maybe this podcast, and part of the increasing knowledge of it, is that the consumer puts pressure on those manufacturers that supply us with everything.
Right.
Some of it is food, some of it is drink, plastic, and some of it is in clothing. Yes, the non-stick pans. So in the end, the consumer does have a lot of power because the manufacturers will go where the money is.
Sure.
And if there is a demand for this and for somebody to be as close to EDC free as they can with properly accredited and audited tracked sourcing, then yes, I think there will absolutely be a market. Because nobody wants to, the vast majority of people don't want to consume products which they know are adversely affecting them.
100%.
So,
100%.
yeah.
So it's just a matter of combined effort
Yes.
and more awareness of the topic, and then collective action potentially.
Yes, which is how many campaigns of change have started and are effective.
Yes, true. Well, on that unfortunate note, we're going to leave it there. But if you did like the episode, please like and subscribe. Hopefully, we were able to provide you with some practical information on avoiding those EDCs. I think we will have other episodes where we will talk about this in further detail. But for now, that's all from me. Ahmed, we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you and goodbye.